Hi, welcome to the Optimizing Your Brilliance podcast, where we get to the source of what makes people brilliant and explore how to eradicate the barriers that stop you from shining. By shining, I mean being at your absolute best in both work and life. You'll hear from business and thought leaders who bear all and share their insider secrets, along with my episodes focused on optimizing your performance, productivity, success, and well-being. My name is Estelle Reed, founder of Be, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author of Inner Brilliance, Out to Shine, 10 Antidotes to Imposter Syndrome, Workaholism and Stress. So, if you're ready to take your work life to the next level, let's begin. Welcome back. If you're tuning in and you've listened to all the other 8 chapters, for those of you that are new here, I'm reading from my best-selling book, Inner Brilliance, Out to Shine, 10 Antidotes to Imposter Syndrome, Workaholism and Stress. And we're up to chapter 9, antidote number 9, Learn to Handle Rough Seas. Quote, "It's not what you do, but the state you do it in, the Optimum Health Clinic." For those of you that don't know, when I had ME, I went to the Optimum Health Clinic and that's how I recovered. So if you're suffering with chronic fatigue or anything like that, COVID, post, whatever it's called, I think the fatigue you get with COVID lingers, I can highly recommend that clinic. Okay, so let's get into it. Our state of mind is our way of being at any moment. State of mind becomes important if we work on the premise that it influences our decisions. I once bought a midlife crisis in practical sports car, only to sell it 3 weeks later and lose thousands of pounds because I was in a strange mood when I bought it. Behaviour, action or inaction, and ultimately our performance and the results we get. We damage our state of mind when we overwork or bash ourselves with a metaphoric imposter syndrome stick. Our state of mind also influences how much we shine too. The more we shine, the more people and natural success is drawn to us. In every moment of every day, we get to choose whether we enhance our shine, how we navigate away from the rocks, and handle rough seas. You do have that power, as hopefully you will see in this chapter. Heading: Boosting Performance. Recently, I had a coffee with an old client who has become a friend. She was the one who kicked me up the rear to get on and write this book. She is the one who encouraged me to achieve another lifelong ambition, to ski. Our conversation turned to the French Alps. A few years ago, her performance dropped off whilst her friend's skiing had improved, so she decided to have a top-up lesson to get back on track. Her ski instructor, the lovely Tom, took her down the kiddies' penguin slope to begin with. She had to do a variety of mini jumps and duck under arches. Then they went off-piste for an hour and she had to ski on knee-deep snow. It drove her mad and she felt frustrated. Tom sensed this and asked her how she felt when she'd finished a challenging run in the past. This was clever. She started to recall a time when her performance was at its best and replayed this in her mind's eye. Re-seeing the positive movie triggered good feelings. She was re-dipping in a good way. That was a term I used in the previous chapter. He asked her how she felt now, and she said, "I feel great." Her face lit up as her feelings shifted from frustrated to excited. She set off on the red run which they'd just approached without a second thought. What Tom did was get her to access the state of mind she needed to take on the red run. It helped her to change state. Right, so I should have said at the start, I've been given permission by my publisher to read most of my book, but not all of it. The bits that I'm not reading out are contained in my free workbook, which you can download on my website. So if you're watching, you can scan that QR code I'm pointing to right now. If you're listening, then if you go over to estellereid.com, you can download the workbook and the journal that accompanies this series and my book. So I'm going to skip over the action bits because I'm assuming you're listening, you're walking, you're doing something, you've not got your notepad to hand. And as I say, you can then go through all of those activities in the workbook. So, heading, state of mind. State of mind is a culmination of what we think, what we feel, how we use and hold our body, the neurochemicals and hormones. For example, when we observe someone watching a TV sketch, which they think is funny, their body may move back and forth as they laugh. As they laugh, they release the neuropeptide endorphin, which relieves pain, produces feelings of euphoria and pleasure. Conversely, when you see someone in a depressed state, for example, following a relationship breakdown, you may notice that they hold their body slumped or have a closed posture as the person thinks or talks about the relationship, which triggers feelings of sadness. Repeating this cycle of thinking, ruminating, then embeds the depressed state. When we're depressed, the neurotransmitters serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine are involved. We can change our state by using our bridge to first recognize what's going on and then engage in our captain to redirect our state by taking constructive action. We can change the following. Number 1, how we think. See Chapter 8. Every thought we have causes neurochemical changes. For example, practicing gratitude produces dopamine and serotonin, 2 neurotransmitters which are responsible for happiness and contentment. Number 2, how we feel. We create meta feelings about feelings our bodies have just experienced. An example of this would be feeling annoyed with yourself following an angry outburst in a team meeting. We'll look at how you can circumnavigate these feelings later. Number 3 are neurochemicals and hormones. By taking charge of what we think, feel and do, we can influence our biology too. For example, what exercise we take and the food we consume. More about these things in Chapter 10. Or choosing to perk yourself up, having recognised that you're in a negative state by spending time with someone who makes you laugh. Now, on the neurochemicals and hormones front, oh my goodness, once I realised the perimenopause had hit, this was so true. I didn't know what was up with me. I was practising all these things. I was thinking, I don't feel myself. I had lots of physical symptoms as well. Aches, pains, brain fog, couldn't sleep. It was hell. Not only that, I stopped feeling as happy as I normally would. Anyway, I'm the kind of person that if I don't need to take a drug, I won't. I'll see if I can do things naturally. Well, let me tell you folks, HRT changed my life. I feel like I'm 27 again. The hot flashes have gone, my aches, my pains. Every time I went out for a walk, I felt like I'd done like a really intense session down the gym. It's not like that anymore. What else has changed? Brain fog, loads better. As my friend, I was interviewing my friend on the podcast the other day and she was talking about the word fairy, where words just disappear. All of that has come back. Occasionally I forget my words. And yeah, I just feel level-headed, normal, and like my old self. So I sound like a drugs pusher, don't I? What I'm saying is don't suffer in silence. And for me, it started at about age 45 and it gradually got worse. And it took me until I was 50 to actually take medication. So yeah, there you go. Thank you, Davina McCall. You re-educated us all. If you've not watched that documentary, go and watch it. It's brilliant. It really changed my thinking because I was scared of taking HRT, if I'm honest. Right, back to the book. In essence, everything is inextricably linked. Our state of mind is an expression of what's happening on the inside. This is expressed through our non-verbal communication on the outside and influences how much we shine. Our state of mind also affects our performance at work. The great news is that our captain can take charge of this and create more positive, effective states of mind. So why state of mind matters? In a study of 740 leaders conducted by Alexander Caillet, Jeremy Hirschberg, and Stefano Petiti, I've not pronounced that right, they selected, I'm laughing at myself, because if you've been listening along, you'll notice that I mispronounce things all the time. It's just part of my quirk. They selected 18 states of mind and asked the leaders how often they experienced them and what impact it had on their effectiveness and performance. They identified 90% of respondents reported that calm, happy, and energized, chi for short, are the three that drive the greatest levels of effectiveness and performance. However, frustrated, anxious, tired, and stressed, the abbreviation is FATS, states of mind were also relatively common. Most leaders reported that FATS states often yield benefits in the short term, but are detrimental in the long term, especially in relationships. States vary in intensity and length. For example, when someone tells you a joke, you may laugh hard until you are crying and keep laughing for several minutes as you replay the joke in your head, or giggle for a few seconds. That would be a good use of your captain. Equally, have you noticed how much energy you expend having had an emotional outburst or spent time with someone who was intensely emotional? How drained you can feel once the intense emotion dissipates. More about how to gain more energy in the final chapter. Heading: when state damages our performance. My thinking and performance were disrupted recently at my granddad's funeral when I was asked to share a reading that was important to him. Not only were the words very moving, but for obvious reasons, other feelings were going on too. I found it really tough. All I had to do was read from a script. I didn't have to remember a thing. So what went wrong? My performance was poor as it caught me by surprise. My captain had gone AWOL because I'd been a public speaker for 25 years. The sheer arrogance of it, eh? I didn't think I needed to manage my state, and to be honest, I'd clocked off. I was wrapped up in seeing my granddad's smiling face in his cowboy hat on the order of service, followed by his coffin being carried down the church aisle. It triggered a variety of different and unexpected feelings. I had no time to process them and so tried to push them beneath the surface. Big mistake. Susan David, a Harvard School medical psychologist, in her book Emotional Agility, Get Unstuck, Embrace Change and Thrive in Work and Life, refers to bottlers. These are people that bottle up the feelings, and she says, unfortunately, trying not to do something takes a surprising amount of mental bandwidth. And research shows that attempting to minimize or ignore thoughts and emotions only serves to amplify them. If you do one thing, admit how you're feeling. Acknowledging will help to dissipate the thought or feeling. Your unconscious mind has given you the thought, feeling, and it's wanting your attention. So let your autopilot know you have heard them. For example, using your inner captain, you could say to yourself, I'm angry, sad, frustrated, nervous, etc. about X, and that's okay. Feelings are normal. And we say this all the time, actually, to our daughter, because she will say, oh, I'm sorry for being upset, or, I'm sorry I got cross, or whatever else. And I will say to her, look, you're entitled to have your feeling. The minute you try and suppress that feeling, back to what I was saying in the previous chapter, it'll bite you on the rear some way. It'll either give you pain in your body, or you'll have an emotional outburst when you least expect it. Or, just as in the example I've just gone through, at my granddad's funeral, all of a sudden I was having all of these emotions. In truth, I didn't have a close relationship with my granddad. I've got a hilarious little story. So when we got married, when I was 25, we'd relocated to Derby, and back in the day, you used to put your wedding list on, in a shop like Debenhams, and that's where ours was. And so we'd been round, we'd selected all the items, we'd picked some items from this beautiful Wedgwood set, and I don't think my grandparents realised that they could have gone to Preston, because they lived in Carnforth at the time, and just placed an order there. Instead, bless them, they drove all the way down to Derby, where we lived, placed the order, and not only did so the expectation wasn't that, people have got to buy the whole tea set. They could just buy an item that they liked or could afford. Bless them, they bought the whole dinner service. I'll always be grateful for that. We still have it. It still comes out at dinner parties. But they never popped in to see us. They just drove all the way back. They didn't pop in for a brew or anything like that. And that's just how our relationship was. It was distant. And, some relationships are like that, aren't they? And so because the relationship had always been distant, I didn't expect to feel emotional at the funeral. But lo and behold, some feelings surfaced at the moment I didn't want them to appear, which was when I was reading out what I'd been asked to read out, which actually, apparently, it's something that they read at AA. And I didn't realise that at the time, but it is a really inspirational, I don't know whether you'd call it a poem or a reading or whatever else. But yeah, it was everything just kind of came to the surface at that moment, and it impacted on my performance. So hence why, if you acknowledge how you feel, or if you sit, you allow yourself to sit and feel the feelings, because often we're afraid of feelings, aren't we? And I was working with a client the other day, and we were talking through the goals or objectives, and they said to me, oh, I'm really afraid of what feelings are going to come up, and I'm afraid of opening Pandora's box. And I said to them, look, I'm not going to lie, when we open Pandora's box, it can be a bit rough. We can get a waft of all of those feelings, but the point being, as we open up those feelings, we're in a safe environment, we are processing all of those feelings, and we are getting rid of the triggers for those feelings by using Havening. So the point being, and I guess what I'm trying to do is define the difference between ruminating over something. So ruminating would be to continually think about a negative event that's occurred, either recent past or distant past, because every time you open up that memory, you're going to get a waft of those feelings, which, I'll say to clients, it'll make you feel sad and blue, unless you use a technique such as EFT, emotional freedom technique, or Havening to get rid of those triggers. And the way it works in the brain is, so imagine where the memory is encoded. So you've got a neural pathway in your brain, and I'm trying to describe this so that you can, because I'm showing this on YouTube, but I'm also trying to describe it visually so that it makes sense. So imagine a line in your brain. At one end, you've got the presynaptic neuron. At the other end, so imagine two stumps, you've got the postsynaptic neuron, and in between is the neural pathway. So at the postsynaptic neuron end, so imagine a little stump, and imagine some little bumps come out on that stump. And those bumps are what's responsible for your trigger. So when we are triggered, we've got some receptors. So these bumps are receptors that are made to go in and out. So they come out when we are triggered emotionally by something. Now, what Havening does is, so Havening involves touch, rubbing your hands, or you can rub shoulder to elbow, you can rub your face. And what Dr. Ron Rudin discovered is that that produces serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitter, delta waves, the brainwave that we experience in deep healing sleep, and then something called calcineurin. And calcineurin is the magic ingredients, because what it does is, so back to that neural pathway, the postsynaptic neuron, you've got some bumps that come in and out. Those are your triggers. These are your receptors. And as your brain produces that calcineurin, what it does is it gets into those receptors and it makes them retract, but permanently retract, so they can't come out again. And this is, the official term is depotentiation, which basically means that the receptors can't come out. And if the receptors can't come out, because this is what gives you the feeling and the emotional trigger, the neural pathway is broken. It just doesn't work anymore. So everything downstream from it, so in other words, we're triggered into having a feeling, which then triggers thoughts, which then triggers behavior and our state of mind. None of that can occur because the neurotransmitter can't move from one side to the other because there's no receptors to receive it. So it's really fascinating stuff. It is like cheating change. Often when people use Havening, which I've covered in chapter 6, my clients will sit there and they'll go, I can't even remember actually what we were Havening, what we've been working on. They can't recall the event. So it's like they've almost got memory amnesia, which is why I will say to clients, look, don't Haven anything that you've got to go to court for, because you might not be able to recall the event as it was encoded in your brain. So really, really powerful stuff. That's the moment when it is okay to unpack Pandora's box, because when you pull those memories out, if you are using Havening at that time, if you're following the Havening protocol, what you're doing is you're getting rid of the memories. So the box is then empty. And it's empty of those triggers that you've been working on. And then the magic of it is it then just creates automatic behavior, belief, and feeling change, because you can't be re-triggered in that scenario because the receptors have gone. Really, really magical stuff. Anyway, so that, for me, is the best way to deal with feelings. Just get rid of the trigger in the first place. Don't try and manage those negative thoughts, those negative feelings. Unpack them, get them out of Pandora's box, get rid of them for good. And that's not to say that you'll never have any negative feelings ever again. Of course you will. Of course you will. That's part of human nature. But what we're doing is we're pressing reset on those things that hold us back, the things that bent us out of shape as kids, those limiting beliefs, behaviours and emotions that we picked up as we were growing up in those formative years that actually just don't serve us anymore. And so all Havening is doing, this is my metaphor, is we're pressing reset. We're pressing reset on who you are. We are pressing reset so that you go back to that beautiful human being that was born just as you were, because you were made perfectly. Yeah, anyway, as you can tell, I'm really passionate about this stuff. So yeah, don't ruminate on feelings or thoughts, get rid of them. Okay, so back to reading from the book. When you learn EFT later in this chapter, you'll be able to shift feelings with gusto. So you can also use EFT to shift the feelings as well. Unprocessed, bottled, unadmitted feelings have a way of making an appearance, a way of making themselves heard. It was my turn to approach the lectern. For the first 30 seconds of reading, my voice sounded a cross between a prepubescent teenager, Tarzan, like that, and a horse race commentator, reading really fast. I couldn't look at my audience. I had sweaty palms and I was scared I was going to cry. I had to quickly wake up my captain and take charge of my state. I took a breath, more about breath work later, slowed the pace of my voice, and I adjusted my body. After the funeral, I went to speak to my cousin. He'd found it tough too. Also a veteran public speaker. The emotional component knocked me off course, which interfered with my performance. Heading: Rocks and Rough Seas. It was the races with my friends, and one of them turned to me and said, with sad puppy dog eyes, "And how are you? You've had a tough time, haven't you?" My kind, sweet friend, always empathetic and concerned for people. At first, I thought the question was being directed at someone else and began to turn round to see if one of my other friends was in a line of sight. Realising she was talking to me, I got with the programme. I rewound the tape for the last 12 to 18 months. I didn't want to break rapport by immediately disagreeing with her, and I said, yes, there have been some tough spots, but it actually feels like it's been a great year. I broke rapport. I've never been good at telling a porky. My friend was also right. There had been some tough times. I wish I had a magic wand to wipe away all the crappy events we have to deal with in life. The sad fact of the matter is the waters will get rough at times. But what I've learned over the years is that the more self-development work you do by using strategies I share in this book, the more resilient you can become. Your inner dialogue becomes less critical because the limiting beliefs have been dissolved through Havening, EFT, and taking positive action. Those critical voices were never yours anyway. They were someone else's from your past. Unhelpful behaviours and emotions recur less. You can deal with more, and it takes you longer to reach full capacity from a stress point of view. And on that point, so probably since writing this book, probably one of the most stressful times of my life was so my dad had had blood cancer for many years, about 10 years, and then eventually it turned into lung cancer and he got a terminal diagnosis. Then, within weeks, my father-in-law, he also got a terminal diagnosis, and he was given 6 weeks to live. So my dad was given 3 months to live. My father-in-law was given 6 weeks to live. He also had lung cancer. It was just such a difficult time. And deep down, I kind of knew at the start of the year, it was during COVID as well, I could see my dad was fading. I knew he was dying. I felt like I was the only one that could see he was fading away and dying, which was difficult, but it also helped me to prepare myself mentally, because when we are going through a change, so a change is losing someone, we go through, and it's based on terminal patients, their reactions or the process that they go through, which I discussed, I think it was in chapter 1. And the first step is denial. So we deny anything's happening. The second step is anger, blaming, resentment. And then we get to internalization, or acceptance. So we accept that this thing is happening. And I was very quickly able to accept that this thing was happening with my dad. which was my way. That was my coping mechanism. And then we get to internalization and growth. And so we're imagining those two situations. Then I didn't feel like I could cope with anymore, but I got a phone call from my mum from a hospital bed. I think it was something like 3 days earlier, she'd had a stroke. And I was just like, I can remember in that moment thinking, I cannot cope with anymore. I felt like my head was going to explode. You know, the risk of losing both parents in that moment was really, really tricky. And she delayed telling us because she knew that we were dealing with my dad dying. And then it was almost like, okay, universe, just throw some more crap at us. And then our daughter had to be sent for an emergency appointment because they were concerned she might have a tumour on her eye. And with every, life is going to throw you waves. And with every wave, it hit hard. And I kind of was knocked off my feet for a while. But having done all the work that I'd done, I was able to stay resilient, and I still continued seeing all my coaching clients. In fact, when my sister and I were caring for my dad in the last few weeks of his life, we were looking after him one day, I was upstairs coaching one of my clients. This is how I ended up with this background, actually, because I realised, I needed to, I did a podcast, there were all sorts of things. So you're able to cope with a lot more than you realise. And as I say, it's inevitable that life will throw you some waves, but it's how you choose to deal with them. So back to the story. Your inner dialogue becomes less critical because limiting beliefs have been dissolved through Havening, EFT, and taking positive action. Those critical voices were never yours anyway. They're often someone else's from your past. Unhelpful behaviours and emotions recur less, you can deal with more, and it takes you longer to reach full capacity from a stress point of view. Aches, pains, and illnesses magically disappear. Ultimately, your ship is light and agile enough to be able to better navigate through rough seas. The reason I felt confused when my friend said I'd had a tough year is that I'd processed those experiences. You're going to learn how to use another tool which will help you to process unhelpful emotions in this chapter. It was difficult at the time, but those incidents hadn't tarnished my whole year. From my perspective, we'd been to 3 wonderful weddings, had a ski trip of a lifetime with my stepson and daughter-in-law. I'd written this book and business was booming. Those were the experiences that left a lasting imprint on my year. The other incidents had been dissolved. We are feeling beings. Our feelings give our life meaning. Is our work life good or is it not so good? Our emotions set us into motion. Our feelings contribute to whether we shine or not. Throughout this book, I've used the terms feeling and emotion interchangeably to mean the same thing. We are now going to dig deeper into emotions and their origins. Heading: Joy has competition. Let's work on the basis that you want more joy in your work life and you've identified a vision and a plan of how you're going to get there. That was covered in previous chapters, folks. However, as demonstrated above, we can come across rocks and rough seas. Depending on which theory you read, joy has competition because there are 7 other emotions which we can experience. There are lots of different theories about emotions, and there is currently no consensus on the definition, with estimates ranging from 34,000 different ones to 4. However, Robert Plutchik, an American psychologist, identified 8 primary emotions that serve as the foundation for all others. He built a visual tool called the Wheel of Emotions and listed them as contrasting polar pairs. For example, anger versus fear, joy versus sadness, trust versus disgust, and surprise versus anticipation. Joy has even more competition when we allow imposter thoughts and overwork as a result of them. There is no headspace for us to experience joy, particularly when our personal or free time has been squeezed to the minimum to accommodate our work. Emotions are hardwired, innate and universal. They're physical and instinctive. Emotions come from the limbic system and have helped us survive. The limbic system is located deep within the brain and is responsible for behavioural and emotional responses. We experience emotions in our body, and their purpose is to automatically trigger a response to a stimulus. For example, when someone cuts you up on your way to work, you don't think, ooh, time to stop. You slam your brakes on instinctively so that you don't go into the back of the other vehicle. You feel a physical jolt in your body and your muscles tense. You breathe and pulse. Your breath and your pulse quicken. Once the threat has passed, your body returns to normal. That's how emotions should work. However, we can wind ourselves up and create a negative state of mind, which encompasses feelings, body tension or shape, neurochemicals and hormones, because of what we think about the said event. In Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, the classic tribute to hope from the Holocaust, he says, between stimulus and response, there is space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Our opportunity lies in how we react and deal with our feelings. For example, our feelings about feelings. Heading: Meta emotions. Meta emotion is an organized structured set of emotions and cognitions about the emotions, both one's own emotions and the emotions of others. So in other words, we have feelings about our feelings or other people's feelings. There are 4 types of meta emotions. Number 1, negative. Feeling remorse about feeling angry, having shouted at the driver who cut you up. Negative positive, feeling guilty about feeling generally happy, having spent time with someone who was down on their luck. Positive, feeling happy about someone else's joy, having passed an exam. Positive negative, feeling glad about feeling angry following an emotional outburst in a meeting. In a study by the Greater Good Science Centre based at UC Berkeley, they found that people who had more frequent negative meta emotions also experienced greater feelings of depression, and that it wasn't associated with other types of meta emotion. They discovered that many people get upset, nervous or angry about their own negative emotions in particular. And then we've got some action steps. We have the power to choose how we deal with our emotions and thinking, hence the previous chapter. And by the way, I should mention, you can access the action steps by heading over to the QR code that I'm pointing to now. If you're watching on YouTube, or if you go to estellereed.com, you can download the workbook and the journal that accompanies this book. You can also access details of my Shine coaching program, which is based on this book too, if you don't want to do all the heavy lifting yourself. So, your captain is in charge of managing the space between stimulus and response. Remember that we can operate up to 5% more consciously with your autopilot taking care of the remaining 95%. However, your average human being will run on autopilot 99% of the time. For example, if following a tense exchange in a meeting with a colleague who addressed the fact that you'd not delivered on an objective, which resulted in you feeling shame, and then when you return to your desk, you chunter to yourself about the incident, which triggers meta feelings of anger, you are responsible for that feeling, not anyone else. Are you going to lengthen the period you hurt yourself and potentially other people? Think about how things can snowball sometimes because of one incident. Or are you going to use your bridge to tune into what you're thinking, feeling, and how you're behaving, and get your captain to redirect your ship back towards destination joy? You could simply choose to take a deep, relaxing breath, more about this in the next chapter, which would put the brake on your fight or flight system and accelerate your parasympathetic nervous system, which helps you to calm down. Or you could take yourself off to the loo and do some tapping, which is what's coming up next. Heading: when your bucket is overflowing. One of the analogies I use to explain state is the bucket. The more negative triggers you experience throughout the day, the higher the water level becomes, the greater risk of you overflowing emotionally and behaviourally. For example, you get up having tossed and turned the night before because of a project you're concerned about at work. You're already tired and the day has only just begun. You check in on your email and you've got a message from an obnoxious work colleague. You pen a quick flamer back and triumphantly press send. Because you're tired, you trip up over the dog, which causes you to spill your coffee. You're already late as you hit the snooze button 3 times and haven't got time for clearing up. You shove a processed sugar-fueled cereal bar down your throat for speed, which creates a mini energy high and then a grumpy slump. You go to your wardrobe and realise that you're out of shirts and you have to put on yesterday's crinkly smelly one. Then you reach the motorway and there's an accident. You have to bump your 9 a.m. appointment. As you sat in the traffic jam, you start to reflect on what you said in your flame mail and wonder if you were quick to temper. You worry about facing your colleague. You've not even got to work yet and your bucket is overflowing. How can we perform at our best when we're in that kind of state? Most of the things that occurred above are within our control. Heading: under captain's orders. Our lack of sleep creates a chain reaction of events which, other than the traffic jam, are within our control. Even then, there are apps which we can use to send us notifications of any traffic issues so that we can take an alternative route. We need to be alert to the information coming in on our bridge. If the night before we'd realised that we were concerned about the project, what we could have done is use the Inner Brilliance How to Shine process. So the journaling process that you can download as part of this book, go to estellereid.com. To process what we actually think about the project, to allay any worries as opposed to ruminating and tossing and turning. We could have made ourselves feel like the captain by identifying what's within our power and control and identifying a plan B. We could have calmed ourselves with our reassuring, compassionate inner captain. I'd use my cheerleader for this situation. We could have done some yoga to release the tension of the day from our bodies and calm our fight or flight system so that we were able to drift off to sleep more soundly and stay asleep. When we wake up in the middle of the night, often having crashed through exhaustion, it can be because we've not processed enough information during the day. Therefore, this build-up of thoughts must be dealt with during night shift, whilst we're in dream sleep. Giving our brain too many things to sort out can cause our system to crash and wake up in the middle of the night. And I'll talk about how you resolve that and why that occurs in the next chapter. If I feel overloaded before I sleep or wake up in the middle of the night, I empty my brain by writing everything down. That way, my mind can relax and get on with sleeping. I'll be going into why sleep is important for us physiologically and how to get more of it in the next chapter. Next heading, Calming Rough Waters, EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. Throw a pebble in the water and it will create ripples. Throw a boulder and it will make waves. Throw a series of boulders and it will take a while for the waters to calm. If you're impatient like me and you want to circumnavigate this process and you're keen to make a quicker recovery from something that's created ripples, waves, or you book it to overflow, you can use EFT. Emotions can catch us unawares. I've used EFT en route to business meetings a few times. Feeling the flip of my stomach and the slight buzz of anxiety before pitching for a piece of work is unhelpful, so I tap, in brackets, I use EFT to get rid of the feelings. Equally, sometimes we have a hell of a day. We're lost at sea with our emotions and feel overwhelmed by the build-up of negative triggers throughout the day. EFT was my go-to tool before I discovered Havening. It's not as straightforward as Havening, which is probably why I use it less, but it can be just as effective. Havening was designed having researched the effectiveness of TFT, thought field therapy, which was the forerunner to EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. For example, I once got a message as I was about to go to bed. I went from 0 to 60 in a second. My face was bright red, all my sleepiness dissipated in an instant. I told my husband briefly what had happened and explained that I knew I wouldn't sleep unless I sorted myself out. I went downstairs to my study and I journaled. That didn't do it. It moved the issue on and helped me to gain clarity, but I still felt wound up, so I used EFT to shift it. Within 20 minutes, the whole issue was put to bed and I slept like a baby. So I'm going to skip the next bit of actions, which, as I say, are available in the workbook that you can download. Heading, what is EFT? EFT releases emotional blockages in your energy system by tapping on acupressure points in your body. EFT is based on the same energy meridians used in traditional acupuncture to treat physical and emotional ailments for over 5,000 years, but without needles. Now, if you're as skeptical as I was when I first came across tapping, that's okay. Like Havening, you've got to experience it to believe it. Also, you must experience it in the right way, because whatever you happen to be thinking of at the time as you tap, that's what you'll be working on. When I first set up my business, it says 15 years ago, it's 20 years ago now, I would get up at 5 a.m. 3 mornings a week to network. A fellow networker introduced my associates and me to tapping. Not only did he invade my personal space by tapping various points on my body, and he did that in public, I felt so embarrassed. Anyway, he said various things which I had to repeat whilst he tapped away on me like a woodpecker, and then declared I was cured. All I could think was, I feel like a right idiot doing this in front of everyone. Feeling like an idiot became the issue I'd worked on, because EFT works on whatever you're thinking. I just didn't realise it at the time. I then avoided the technique like a plague for 6 years, declaring that it was a load of old rubbish and it didn't work because the thing he was supposed to be changing hadn't been cured. I later learnt, when I eventually trained as an EFT practitioner, that this was because I was thinking about something else. When you use EFT, it's like editing a document. You could have lots of them open in Word, but unless it's on screen as you tap on your keyboard, the document won't get modified. So no thinking about what you're having for your tea as you tap on each point later. When I got diagnosed with ME, I signed up to the Optimum Health Clinic and as part of their programme was assigned an EFTer. He changed my life. Such a kind, compassionate and clever being. He could see right through me and could always get to the root cause of an emotional issue. Whilst ME is a biological disease, we increase our toxic load and exasperate the illness through our toxic thoughts, and I had a few. Hence the need for the journal. We can raise our awareness of what those toxic thoughts are and then tap on them if needs be. Heading: EFT efficacy. Researcher Dr. Dawson Church, PhD, founder of the National Institute of Integrative Healthcare, analysed the results of over 40 EFT studies. He identified that EFT is effective for a wide range of emotional problems, including performance, phobias, pain, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, weight loss, and food. Dr. McCullough is an alternative medicine advocate and physician and best-selling author. On his website, he quotes many EFT studies saying, recent research found that compared to the control group, it significantly increased positive emotions such as hope and enjoyment and decreased negative emotional states like anger and shame. The bottom line is using EFT is going to enhance the power of your captain by equipping you with another tool which can diminish your negative emotions and help you to redirect your ship towards destination joy whenever you feel yourself drifting in the direction of destination grim. Right, what's going to follow are all the instructions on how to use EFT. Now, I think this is going to be unhelpful because you're listening to this. But if you head over to my YouTube channel, you will find under the playlist is EFT. You'll be able to see a video of me using EFT and I'll talk you through the full instructions. What I'll also do is in the show notes, I'll include a link to that video so that you can either see or, actually see, because it'll be on YouTube, so you can see how to use it. So as I've said before, if you want me to do the heavy lifting, if you want me to apply EFT, head over to my website, estellereed.com, and if you click on the Shine coaching program, or any of the coaching programs, to be honest, I can do the EFT work for you. Right, heading: cultivating joy. So, having learned how to handle rough seas and get rid of the things that elbow joy out of the way, it's important to consciously create opportunities to cultivate more of it. Originally, when I started contemplating my joyful experiences, my mind took me back to when I was a little girl. I had very few reference points as an adult. When I was 10 and my sister was 7, we'd get dropped off at one of Morecambe's top attractions, the Fun House. It was like soft play, only for hard nuts. Girls dressed in rah-rah skirts would proudly display second-degree burns from the vertical slide as a badge of honour. Sometimes my dad and his girlfriend would join us. One of our favourite activities was a 6-foot wide wooden tunnel which rotated. If you sat in it, you'd move up the rotating wall and then slip down again. My dad would take things to the next level and stand spread-eagled and hang on for a full rotation, like he was doing a cartwheel. My sister and I would stand there, mouths agog, quickly turning round to check out whether any of the other kids were watching and to see if they were impressed or not. On subsequent visits, he was encouraged to repeat this trick. He knew how to have fun. I have alluded to the fact that I can still be Miss Stiffknickers. My first realisation of needing to lighten up was when my daughter was 4. We'd gone away for a weekend break with my extended family. It was fantastic, just like the good old days when we'd all gather for prawn cocktail and roast beef dinner at my nana and granddad's house on a Sunday. We'd rented a big house in Penrith and it was January, probably not the best time of year to head north, but my Nana was treating us all for her birthday. On our journey to the house, snow started to hit the windscreen in a hypnotic swathe, to the extent where we considered turning back. When we eventually arrived, it was late, so went straight to bed. When we got up, we did a tour of the hilly gardens which were covered in snow. The owners had thoughtfully left us a sledge. I joined forces with my cousins and we set about building a snowman for my daughter. Then we all regressed. My daughter wasn't too keen on trying out the sledge, so my cousin and I decided to carry out a demonstration. We flew down the hill, laughing and screaming in a good way. The look of disgust on my daughter's face. She stood at the top of the hill with her hands on her hips and shouted, "Calm down, Mummy, you're not supposed to be having fun." That was when I realised I wasn't having nearly enough fun in my life. Me having fun was alien and an unnerving concept to her. I'm going to skip the action steps after that. So, next heading, scheduling joy. Research has shown that for many, the positive effect of anticipating the holiday will be stronger than the actual event, and happiness will increase in the period before your holiday, but be less afterwards. This makes sense. How many times have you indulged yourself in imagining what a holiday will be like, especially when it's dark, cold, and miserable? Equally, how do you feel when you return? We schedule joy with our best mates, Bob and Ju, and Jess too. We are guaranteed belly laughs when we're with them. Ju laughs like Muttley from Wacky Races and sees the funny side in everyday situations. Bob, who initially, when you first meet him, seems quiet and shy, will spontaneously dance like a puppet with imaginary strings on his hands and feet, and sing like Elvis when you least expect it. Jess is one of the sweetest girls I know. One of the memories we have lived off for years and re-laughed at many times was when we went to the Cotswolds for the weekend. Typical of our group, we tend to get overexcited and peak too soon on the first night. We'd managed to polish off a bottle of red wine before dinner, so on empty stomachs. When we eventually arrived at the restaurant with our red wine-stained lips, the waitress was a bit snooty with us. I think I'd be standoffish if I saw us wandering in. Anyway, somebody cracks a joke, not about the waitress, as she was handing out the menus, and I spluttered a little. Trying to recover quickly, feeling embarrassed, I said, "Did I spray you?" It's probably one of those moments where you had to be there. We must learn to stop the wheel, to slow time, to access the joy of life. We must discipline ourselves by scheduling time to live life in the space in between work. That's the great thing about joy-filled memories. They're yours forever and you can re-dip into them anytime. Therefore, how about scheduling some more joy? And I'm going to skip over the next set of actions. Right, heading, summary of key points. States of mind are a culmination of what we think and feel and how we hold our body, which then produces neurochemicals and hormones. We can be the captain and either create an upward positive spiral of emotions or a downward spiral. Using your bridge to monitor incoming information and then passing this on to your captain to redirect your ship helps you to access more joyful and productive states of mind. You can change your state by changing your thinking, your feelings, using EFT or Havening, and how you move your body. This will trigger a more positive concoction of chemicals inside. There will always be rocks and rough seas. It's how we choose to deal with them that counts. The more Havening and EFT work you do, the more buoyancy you'll have and the easier it will be to redirect your ship back towards destination joy. Recognize when you're creating feelings about feelings. Remember, there is space between the original trigger and your reaction. Redirect your response using one of your inner captain's voices. Take a breath, distract yourself, journal, use EFT or Havening. You have so many tools at your disposal now. Get yourself back online, performing, focusing, whatever the state is that you need to be in at that moment by dissipating negative states using EFT. Give joy a chance, identify what you love to do, refund your life and schedule some joy-inducing activities. So, as with all other chapters, if you want help with this stuff, head over to my website. You can download those free resources, the free journal, the free workbook, or access my one-to-one Shine coaching program at estellereid.com. Book a free discovery call. Let's see if we're a fit. And yeah, I'd love to support. I'd love to help you. So what's coming up next is the last chapter. I'm like on a roll today. I thought, right, I'm going to get this project finished because it's quite an endeavour, to be honest. I can understand how people feel recording the book for Audible. It's quite intense, and you've got to be in the right frame of mind to do it as well. So yeah, I'm flying through the remaining chapters and the conclusion today. So take care, and I'll see you again on chapter 10, which is Antidote number 10, Access the Mess Deck, which is all to do with how we recharge, refun our lives, we re-energize. It's all about you. We're polishing off your shine in the final chapter. All right, take care, my lovelies, and speak soon. If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estellereid.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Reid, executive coach, speaker and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimizing Your Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.